So how do you become a millionaire working in banking? And I don't just mean investment banking. I mean front office roles, middle office roles, even back office roles. So I'm not really going to talk about how to become a millionaire, but rather how to maximize your wealth. Because I think a lot of people just go about their entire career wrong, when from the start, you should have a pretty clear plan if your goal is to maximize wealth. The first thing I want to mention is kind of like a caveat to everything is that despite what you may hear from everyone who works in banking and has for decades, banking does not reward loyalty. It's really important because a lot of times you'll see CEOs worked at a bank for 26 years. Yeah, well, I can tell you I've worked in banking and I know lots of people who have done decades at the same firms and still aren't making $500,000 a year. So you can put in your entire life working for a firm and the best they'll give you for your loyalty is to not fire you, which I've seen done anyhow. So don't expect to be rewarded for your loyalty. That doesn't happen. There is something to be said for job stability, which can happen if you work in the not so competitive roles and perform well, but you're not maximizing wealth, which is the point of this video. So without further ado, let's jump right into the front office roles. Okay, so the two front office roles that I'm going to talk about are equity research and investment banking. So we're going to say, here we have front office. I apologize in advance for my awful handwriting. Okay, so we have A, investment banking, and then we have B, equity research. And the reason why I'm putting these two as the front office roles and not sales and trading is because sales and trading, it's not so straightforward how to get your max salary bonus. In these roles, like, you know, in a model, which presumably you do because you got the job, just do a good job and you get paid and you get a good bonus. Show up to work. That's literally all there is. Whereas in sales and trading, it's very heavily desk and personally performance-based. You can have good years, you can have bad years, and immediately get fired and zero bonuses, which I've seen many times with traders. So this is just more like straightforward, make good money front office roles. Obviously, they're extremely competitive. So investment banking, where do you go from there? Well, the worst way to maximize wealth in investment banking is to stay in investment banking. And the way most people do it, and if you go to all these banking forums, you'll see the same idea, which is you're an analyst for, let's say, 1.5 years or 2 years. I think it's 1.5 now. You're an analyst. And then from there, usually you'll go back to business school because you've been at Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. You'll get into Harvard or whatever, and you get your business degree from there. So you'll do something like then go to business school. And there are quite a few routes you can take. I think the most popular one is then to do like 1 year as an associate at the same or another top tier bank. And then you just go straight to PE or VC or any of these deal making shops. So essentially you're starting, like when you're here in the low analyst associate range, you're still making, you know, 150K to 250K or whatever in that ballpark. Obviously it can be it can vary like crazy depending on bank, atmosphere, deals, etc., etc. But it's a very good salary to start off, although you don't have a life, you're working insane hours. But the idea is you do this for like no more than 3 years, and then you go to a place where they work you less. I mean, it's still pretty intense work schedule, but they work you less. And right away in your 4th, 5th year, once you move into PE, VC, you can be making 300-400, and then it just scales up from there. So that's truly how to become a millionaire. But let's get realistic. Only 1% of us actually have a chance of getting into these top roles. And while a lot do try, most fail. So what do we do if we don't get these investment banking type roles? I see my head's blocking some of the words. I apologize for that. So equity research. Okay. So where do you go from there? Now, what's interesting is equity research uses nearly the same exact hard skills as investment banking. It's all the modeling, it's listening to company earnings, it's valuing companies, but there's no deal flow. And because it's not about deal flow, moving into these deal-based companies isn't a reality. I've seen some people do it. Very tricky to do. You could do equity research for 2 years, then get into business school, and then go into banking. Sure, that works. But if you're doing equity research for 3-4 years, and either you don't want to go to business school or you did and ended up back in equity research, the best bet is probably just move into a hedge fund and become a hedge fund research analyst, which then naturally moves into a portfolio manager role or trading or something like that, where you end up making the big bucks if the firm does well, if your desk does well, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the two routes you take traditionally from front office. But that wasn't the point of the video because, let's face it, any of you who are in those roles know this already. So let's move on and let's talk about middle office roles. All right, so it's funny, you'd expect me to say that back office has the lowest chance of making millions, but actually it's kind of middle office. In middle office, you have that balance where you have the better work-life balance, not as intense hours, you have really good job stability, you have a good knowledge set which is transferable to all the other firms, and you get paid pretty well. The downside is nobody makes millions in middle office. It just doesn't happen. And by middle office, I actually mean some trading roles that don't generate a lot of deal flow as well. It's not just those like, are these middle or back office roles? I mean, any role, like when I think middle office, I think, let's write like this. So I think middle office, I think a good way to think about it is roles that pay somewhere in the, let's say they cap out 150 to 250 all in is the max that you'll make. And what I mean is, like, if you're an associate, third level associate, the absolute most you will make is 250. That would be kind of a middle office associate role. The front office ones could beat that at your senior associate levels. In middle office, honestly, it's more like 200 usually. In very rare cases, I would say even just put this at 200 all in. It does go a little higher. But that's the idea. In that 150 to 225-ish range, as a third or fourth year associate, maxing out there probably means you're in middle office land. Now, what do you have when you're in middle office? Typically, here's what you have. Your skills are finance, but also some tech-related skills. Like you have some project management, maybe you know SQL, but you also are really strong in finance. So you kind of have a blend of different skills. You don't have those deal-generating or client-facing skills or experience, quite frankly, but you have a lot of very strong finance knowledge, general, maybe more, let's say, capital markets. So how do you make millions? The truth of it is you don't. Because what happens is, let's take these examples where your all-in is capped at 200 as an associate. Right? What happens is you make VP and you really don't see a big increase. Like as a VP, you really just go to like 300 max. Like that's the biggest all-in you're going to get as a VP in these middle office roles. Like max, like you do VP for 2, 3, even 4 years VP, you'll get 300, maybe a little more. And then you land in what's either called senior VP or director level, executive director level, whatever you want to call. At that level, the absolute max you're going to get is 400K. It's really like you're stuck there. And quite frankly, if you're working in banking, you're never going to be a millionaire on 400K because you're going to get taxed up the wazoo. And then you have all your benefits, which you have to pay for, and your take home, realistically, probably something in the 150 range after tax and everything. It's very hard to become a millionaire with that. And presumably you have a family by then or whatever. So you don't. Now, what most people who want to maximize their money do is they do, 2 to 3 years as an ED and try to bounce to another company and get managing director, or go to another company at a director role where they give them a substantial base salary increase. But generally that's a mistake, because even if they give you a pretty big base salary increase, the bonus is still going to cap out at a similar range. I've seen that happen a few times. So it's really hard. I've seen people go from one bank, from ED to ED to ED, just jumping banks every few years, and it hasn't done much for their career. So it's very hard to know where to go. A good place to go is maybe to go to a hedge fund and run something, like if you were doing risk at a bank. what you could do is, even as a risk VP or associate, a VP or director, you can then move to a hedge fund and be the chief risk officer. I've seen people do it, and sure, you'll make the same 200-300, but as the hedge fund grows, you'll grow with it, start having people under you, and eventually maybe you'll hit $1 million. So it's entirely possible. That's generally how this works out. All right, now let's talk about the interesting one, which is back office. And I'm going to offend a lot of people with this, but it's okay. All right, back office has traditionally been paid the worst in banking, which was a little disrespectful. Now, they didn't bring in the money, but there were good skills there, and they were doing a good job, and the banks just really didn't respect it much and pay it well. Well, now I'm here to say it's downright shameful, because especially, I'm talking to you programmers, if you are a programmer working in a bank, you are making way, way lower now than what tech pays. Even a few years ago when I worked in banking, like there was a discrepancy, but it wasn't so noticeable. Now it's just insane. Like a good Python programmer starts in the, 80 to 100 range at most tech firms and very quickly moves up. If you're talking Google, Amazon, or Twitter, it's much higher. And that's just with a bachelor's degree. The master's degree, it's insanely higher. And 2 to 3 to 4 years experience. But in banking, you still get those $5,000 to $15,000 year-end bonuses. You still get those measly base salaries. It's like, so you do your analyst, let's say you make associate, right? After 3 years working in back office in banking, I would bet after 3 years, your base salary still didn't hit 100K. But let's say you make 100K at 3 years, which again, any tech company is going to hit that sooner. I'm talking specifically about programmers. We'll get to everyone else in a minute. Okay, so as a programmer, you're like that. You hit VP after another 3 to 4 years of work, your base is 135. So we're talking about like 6 years experience. Your base is 135. You get a $15,000 bonus. That means you're all in as a VP in banking is 150K. Now, I'm not going to get into the exact numbers in tech, but something like Google, Facebook, or Twitter, right out of a master's program or with 2 years experience or something, you're making a 170 base and your bonus is way bigger than banking will pay you. So it's just like, it's crazy. You're almost doubling what you're making in banking with literally half the experience. It's just shameful, quite frankly. And the banking, it moves up so slow, especially in tech. People get promoted really slowly, and then eventually you make ED. So like, what do you do if you get into banking in back office, specifically as a programmer? So ironically, I actually think it's a really good way to start your career. A lot of people who want to do programming just look to get into Google. It's extremely competitive, and the interviews, quite frankly, are brutal, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Google, Uber. But a really nice option is to do 2 years. This is like my personal suggestion. Here, I'm going to take this stuff and kind of shift it away for a second. My personal suggestion would be something like this. You do 2 years at Goldman Sachs as a developer. Let's say you make 80, 90K a year, whatever it is. Then you get a master's degree from a good school. And a good school will take you because you're Goldman Sachs. So you're like a diamond. These master's programs specifically want to bring in people who are going to be employable. Having worked at Goldman Sachs for 2 years means you're very employable. So now you get a master's degree from some really nice techie school, MIT, whatever it is, and you get a master's in computer science. And from there, you then go to Google or Facebook or whatever. Because having that Goldman Sachs experience plus a good master's degree makes it pretty easy for you to get those interviews. You study your elite code, you're golden, and then you're going to be making your 230K all in 3 years into your career. So that's definitely how you make your millions or maximize your income as a programmer, whether you start in banking or you start in a regular tech job. Eventually getting that master's degree, moving into a big company, really good option. You could always go to a smaller shop where you get more experience. It is hard from there to get into a really good place later on, but not impossible, especially if you have a really strong skill set. Now, the back office people who don't have the programming skills, well, you're kind of in the middle office boat, only a little worse. I think you have like the worst prospects in terms of what you can do, unless you move from like a project management role into a product management role at a tech firm. That can work and can make you a lot of money, but it's not really necessarily the easiest thing to do. So what I encourage you to do, and what I always encourage people to do, whether they're middle office or back office, is learn coding. Because right now is when there's this just great opportunity to move from banking into technology. Can you do me a favor right now and jump into the comments and let me know just one word, whether you're in front, back, or middle office, and where you see yourself going in 5 years. Do you see yourself staying in that role? Do you see yourself staying in finance in that position or making a move? And is it one of those moves that I suggested or something else? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, your perspectives on this. Obviously, mine are a little different. And I'll see you guys next week.